This is the story of number 14 Squadron, from August 1942 to September 1943, narrated by Group Captain Maydwell, Royal Air Force. I commanded the 1st Marauder Squadron in the Royal Air Force, and we received our Marauders in late August, and they were the B-26As, the ones with short wings that didn't fly. But we made them fly, and we had two excellent instructors from the United States Air Force, Colonel Garrison and Major Wellborn. And we found that in taxiing the aircraft, we had good visibility and good brakes, and on takeoff there was plenty of power, and the aircraft did not swing. And the landing, although fast, was as straight as a dart, also without any swing. Our pilots took to the aircraft just like swallows that are taking their first flight from their nest. There was never any doom and gloom on our airfield when the Marauders were there. And it was only 2 months later that we had an accident on the bombing range when the tail blew off due to a structural failure. During November, our squadron ran several reconnaissance sorties north of Crete and also further north through the Aegean Islands. And during that time we reported several convoys sailing south towards Tobruk. During December, the squadron was fully occupied on training to drop torpedoes. And we had a success quite early on. On the 20th of January, Flying Officer Elliott was flying a Marauder with a torpedo and saw a 1,500-ton tanker. He dropped his torpedo and blew the bows off. And the turret gunner also damaged the escorting seaplane. Our squadron was allotted a very important task to mine a certain channel between the island of Euboea and Greece. We carried two 1,200-pound mines, and we were a formation of 3 aircraft that took off from Shalufa. The trip lasted 8.5 hours and was a round trip of 1,650 miles. All of it was flown at 50 feet, and we struck the target at midday, knowing that the Italians were probably on guard and might be having a siesta. All our mines were dropped absolutely with pinpoint accuracy, and we returned to base safely. A fortnight later, we had to run another trip because no ship was sunk. This time we took off with 2 aircraft with the same load, and we took off from Shalufa and went as far as the Burgi Channel, which is at Chalkis. We also dropped our mines as low and slow as we could with pinpoint accuracy. And the result was that within a week we had sunk 1 ship and damaged another. So the channel was blocked, and therefore the oil that was coming from Romania to Greece was cut off, and the ships that had to go out into the Aegean Sea, where it was much easier for our submarine to destroy them. On the 21st of February 1943, Number 14 Squadron mounted its biggest operation against the Axis forces. Its target was the harbour in the horseshoe-shaped island of Milos, north of Crete, in which reconnaissance had shown contained enemy shipping on its way to supply Rommel's Axis forces in the Western Desert. I had to organize this operation in a great hurry, with 3 torpedo Marauders and 6 bombing Marauders. The raid was led by Major Lewis, South African Air Force. The problem of briefing of the raid was complicated, The torpedo Marauders had to fly slow and low over the target before releasing their torpedoes, whereas the bombers had to fly low and fast, so they did not get hit by the explosion of their own bombs, which were set at 3 seconds delay. At all costs, I wanted to avoid a disaster that occurred so frequently in World War I, when our troops jumped out of their trenches to attack and were almost immediately annihilated by the ill-timed creeping barrage of our own guns. On this occasion, the torpedo aircraft would lead the raid and have the element of surprise. When the bombers flew in 1 minute later, unfortunately the ack-ack defences would have been alerted, and we lost 2 aircraft. Nevertheless, the raid was a very great success. Flying Officer Clark Hall now tells his story of the raid. Major Lewis, Flying Officer Clark Hall, and Flying Officer Lapthorne, flying the torpedo planes, led across the Mediterranean at 0 feet in loose formation through the Queso Straits between Crete and Scarpanto, and headed northwest for Milos. On arrival, about an hour before sunset, we climbed slightly to clear the shore, and there before us in the small landlocked harbour were 2 ships, one of about 3,000 tons fully laden, just getting under way, with the other of approximately 6,000 tons, anchored. We let down to dropping height of 100 feet and made our run in. For the few seconds it took enemy gunners to wake up, all seemed to be too good to be true. But then the tracer from the ships began whipping past. Release distance of 800 yards quickly came up, and I fired my torpedo aimed at the larger ship, which counted off the 5 seconds necessary for the piano wires holding the torpedo tail horizontal to run off, ensuring straight tracking. This was without doubt the longest 5 seconds of my life, stuck there, flying straight and level at 80 feet, closing at 160 miles an hour, with more rapid-firing guns joining in. Sitting ducks, well aware that between the visible tracers were nasty solid stuff we couldn't see. I was the last to drop, and in turn followed the other 2, steeply, left then right, out through the narrow entrance channel, amazed that we appeared to have come through untouched. As we turned into the channel, my mid-upper gunner, Sergeant Clark, reported a strike on the 3,000-tonner, which had been the target of the other 2. It was later reported sunk, with my target down at the stern. Immediately after Formation A had carried out its attack from due south, Formation B, led by Pilot Officer Donovan, attacked with the 3 bomb-loaded aircraft. The enemy aircraft was now fully alerted. Pilot Officer Donovan now tells his story. As soon as I came over the hill into the harbour, I saw one ship on fire and another with a huge cloud of smoke pouring out of it. So I was a bit confused. Then a terrific barrage started hitting me. I pushed the stick forward and got as low as I could on the water, and then spied another ship, still afloat, behind the smoke. I did a half-circuit of harbour, being hit continuously, and ran in on this remaining ship. I can well remember having to pull back my stick rather sharply after I had dropped my bombs, because I thought I was going to hit the funnel. Bits of metal were flying in the cockpit, and the aircraft was virtually blown out of my hands as I ran in. As his aircraft left the island, Pilot Officer Donovan saw the leading 3 torpedo aircraft were flying away south in the formation, but his own Marauder was too badly damaged to catch them up, so a lonely course for home was set. He pulled up to 5,000 feet and headed through the falling dusk towards Gambit. The aircraft felt very unstable, and the temperature of one engine was rising ominously through loss of oil. Approaching Tobruk, Allied gunners opened up with their Bofors guns. The Marauder fired off the colours of the day and flashed its landing lights, but to no avail, so Donovan had to turn out to sea again. He told the crew to don their parachutes and be prepared to bail out when they recrossed the coast. At the second attempt, the Allied gunners had apparently got the message and did not fire again. However, the overheating engine was on its last legs, and now the other engine was overheating. Sighting a flare path, Donovan flew over it, did a left-hand circuit and came in high. Because he feared having to do an engineless landing, he put the undercarriage down, throttled back, and made his approach very steeply, as one engine had stopped already and the other was likely to do so at any second. The landing was a bit heavy, but the aircraft was in one piece. As Donovan turned off the flare path, the remaining engine ceased. He then discovered that his crew had failed to comply with his order to bail out because they had confidence in his ability to get down safely. Late in February, No. 14 Squadron was ordered to move from Egypt to Algeria, and this required 16 aircraft to fly from Shalufa to Burqa on the first day, which is 800 miles, and 1,250 miles to Talergma on the second day, stopping at Castel Benito to refuel. We took off with 16 aircraft on the 1st of March, and we landed with 16 aircraft on the 2nd of March late at Talergma, where we were met by General Sparks, who was head of the United States Air Force, and also Air Marshal Tedder, who was head of the Royal Air Force in the Middle East. We had our aircraft in Algeria, but the ground party was still in Egypt. And it was 5 weeks before the ground party were taken by Dakota from Egypt to near Algiers before they could rejoin the squadron. The squadron moved from Talergma to Blida, which is near Algiers, and then on to Berne. And on the afternoon of the 10th of June, an aircraft was ordered out to do a crossover patrol between Sicily and Pantelleria. I flew that aircraft, and when I was flying east at sunset, I was attacked by two 109s. So I immediately turned to fly west into the setting sun, and my air gunner definitely damaged one of the 109s because it had white smoke coming from a glycol leak. At that very moment, the top turret fused, and therefore the air gunner was the only one able to defend our aircraft. The battle lasted 12 minutes, and my air gunner kept firing bursts that definitely kept the other 109 away, because as our aircraft was flying, this is the Marauder and this is the 109, I never kept my aircraft longer than 3 seconds on any one course, all within 50 feet of the sea. And this, with the setting sun, confused the 109, which ran out of ammunition because it came right alongside us before it turned away for Sicily. Number 14 Squadron, we had 120 aircrew who came from all parts of the British Empire, but almost half of them came from Australia. Now, the Dominions are the larger countries, self-governing, and therefore when we came to having names for our aircraft, we selected some submarine names because we've been carrying torpedoes, and our favourite and most successful aircraft was Dominion Triumph, Dominion Upholder, Dominion Thunderer and Dominion Revenge. From Bone, the squadron moved to Proctville, which was near Bizerta. And from there, we flew sorties at sea level right up to the French coast and round Corsica and Sardinia. We did 3 sorties a day, which took about 7 hours and covered 1,200 miles, all at sea level, in order to ascertain whether the Italian fleet had broken out and also whether there were any convoys down the coast from Spezia to Naples. In July 1943, my own crew ran several interesting trips right up to Spezia and round the north of Corsica. And during one sortie, we came on a Savoia Marchetti 82, which is a Kangaroo, a very large transport aircraft, flying at sea level, and we flew in front of it, shooting back, and it flopped in the water without any trouble at all. And then, on the next trip, on the 23rd of July, we were flying just near Bastia when we came across a Ju-90. And so we flew up alongside it and shot at it, and it disappeared towards Bastia itself, and there was a huge flame, and it blew up. And it was only 39 years later that we heard through the German authorities that it had been finished off by its own ack-ack. Now, on the 29th of July, we were in the same area, and we treated each mission now as though it was a sort of going out for a day's hunting, and we thought we might always come up against a 6-engine one, since we'd had a 3-engine one and a 4-engine one. Anyway, we were flying north of Corsica, and we saw this aeroplane coming towards us like a block of flats. And it was a Messerschmitt 323, flying at sea level, solo, with no escort. And so immediately we got in front of it, and my tail gunner, who's an exceptionally good shot, he knocked out 3 engines almost immediately. And the Me-323 staggered towards the shore and made a forced landing. It didn't catch on fire, and we have got some very interesting photographs of the German crew taking pictures of themselves so shortly after forced landing. And now, more than 50 years later, I'm still in touch with the pilot of that Me-323, whose name was Oberfeldwebel Walter Hoenig, that is to say, a warrant officer. And later, when the aircraft was in territory that we'd captured, I went with a friend with a hacksaw and cut off 7 prop tips. I kept 2 for myself and gave each member of my crew a prop tip. And 39 years later, I saw Walter Hoenig, and I presented him with a prop tip from his crashed aircraft. And now we are very good friends. On the 17th of August, I took off from Proctville in Dominion Triumph, and we went to Marseille and then to Genoa and back to Spezia, down the west coast of Corsica and Sardinia. And when we got to southern Sardinia, we saw 2 dinghies with 8 airmen aboard, and they were United States aircrew. Evidently, they had been on a raid from the United Kingdom to Regensburg, and then come on to land in North Africa, but they'd run out of fuel and forced landed. Furthermore, our squadron found 5 more dinghies, also roughly in the same area, and we were able to save at least 35 American aircrew. It was a calm sea. During September 1943, Number 14 Squadron continued to carry out long-distance, low-level sorties in the Marauder at sea level every day. And we were always keen to see that the Italian Navy was well bottled up. The day came when the Italian fleet surrendered and came out of Spezia and sailed down the western coast of Corsica and then into the Straits of Bonifacio between Corsica and Sardinia. Now the Germans were alerted, and they swiftly came out with their Ju-88s, and the flagship of the Italian fleet, the Roma, was hit by a radio-controlled gliding bomb which went down the funnel, and the whole ship exploded. And our squadron aircraft saw this incident take place, and our new squadron commander, who had just taken over from me, he was airborne in a Marauder on that particular occasion for 10.5 hours. And the Italian fleet left Bonifacio and sailed for Malta. 14 Squadron played a significant part in depriving the Axis forces of supplies, both men and material, by attacking shipping, laying mines, and maintaining a constant daylight surveillance over the strategic areas of the Mediterranean. A number of enemy aircraft were also destroyed by the Marauders. The admiral commanding the Italian Navy said that the excellence of the Allied air reconnaissance over the Mediterranean neutralized the Italian fleet, which dared not venture out of harbour during daylight. All these successes could only have been achieved by flying the Marauder, which had long range, reliability, adequate firepower, and we shot down 10 enemy aircraft and damaged 13. Of 25 air crews who trained on torpedoes, a year later 40% had been lost. Every sortie there was a chance of being drowned, burnt alive, badly injured, or prisoner of war. It calmed the nerves to put your fate in the hands of God and have faith that you would return safely.